today I do have another crumble pattern that is perfect for those crumbs in strip form. Now I have a pile of strips from some of my layer cake patterns measuring around 1.5 inch by 3 to 4 inches long. But for this pattern you want strips that are at least 1.5 inches wide just to make it easier on yourself. But they need to be 2.5 inches or longer than needed if you want to make this exact pattern. Next you will need an accent fabric and you will cut 6.5 inch squares. Now I cut these squares from excess backing and binding yardage. That way I can think of this more of like a free quilt. But moving forward with your crumble strips, you will sew them together in one single straight line. I'm going to sew just a few just so that way it's more manageable. But next, if one side is already straight, then you'll go ahead and take your 6.5 inch square and sew it to one of the sides with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, if you have a side that isn't straight, then of course you will need to straighten it and line it up before you then sew it to the 6.5 inch square. After it is sewn together, then you'll just take your ruler and trim the excess off. Then, like a log cabin block, you'll just sew that same crumble strip. As long as it's long enough, you might need to sew more pieces together if needed, but you'll just take that and sew it to the other side. Then afterwards, you will square your block up to an 8.5 inch square. Now, yes, I could have squared my block a lot bigger in this example. The smallest one I found was around 2.75 inches long. So I want to be able to use up a good majority of my crumbs for this pattern. But of course, if you have longer and larger crumb sizes, square your block to the largest size that you can. That way you'll utilize your crumbs to its full maximum. Now with the remaining strips, you can just undo some seams and then keep adding on to your crumb strips. Then all you have to do is just repeat these steps until you've made enough quilt blocks to make a quilt top. And here's what all of my blocks look like completed. Now you'll just rotate each block 90 degrees and then sew your blocks together to form rows, and then lastly sew those rows together to complete your quilt top. And here is what my quilt looks like all finished. For the backing, I am using more leftover prints from within this collection, and I am using glide threads in the color Anchor. And here is what my quilt looks like all completed. I will have the edge-to-edge pattern linked down below in the description. Sadly, I wasn't able to make as many blocks as I thought I could. I do like to keep my crumbs separated by collection because that's just kind of how my brain works. But I was only able to yield a smaller baby-sized quilt, which luckily my cats will enjoy so much in their little kitty baskets. But just think about it. All of this was made from scraps from leftover quilts and excess binding yardage, so it basically was like a free quilt. But with all that said, if you could please take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you can be notified for your next amazing quilt project.